So Andre, I hear you've been playing some sort of Mario Party Superstars DLC on the Switch. Fill me in here.
That's right, Tris. After a year, it's finally here in the forms of Mario Party 1 and 2 on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So yes, it's not quite the DLC we were hoping for Mario Party Superstars, but it is fun to have more Mario Party regardless. And I've been having a blast going back to it. Not just once we found out it was coming to Switch, by the way, but also I've been playing this over the past year because eventually I reached a point where I burned out on Mario Party Superstars. I'm like, all right, I want to go back to the classics. So me and my friends have been playing the past games, which a lot of people have seen if you've been following my Twitter account, and I was making all kinds of dumb jokes like, look at the new Mario Party, Westernland DLC and whatever else. So it's been fun going back to it and revisiting where the series all began, over 20 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the legacy of Mario Party. It really did start, well, yes, it started with 1, but it really started with both of these, because 2 changed so much from 1 while keeping a lot the same and improving upon it, but Mario Party 1, oh my gosh, you mentioned this year in general, you've kind of been going back to these classics. I never played Mario Party 1 until this year, which has been interesting.
Interesting is definitely a word for it.
Yes.
Going back to Mario Party 1 is so interesting, as you say, because it's still fun, but it's also hard to justify going back just to this one, because there have been so many improvements in the series since then, including even as soon as Mario Party 2, as you mentioned, that it is a little rough going back, particularly if you've been introduced to the series with the more recent games like Mario Party Superstars, because this game gets brutal.
Yeah.
Now, before we get to that, though, as you mentioned, there is a legacy to this, because it's also easy to forget. Like, this is where it all began, not just for Mario Party, but it kicked off, at the time, an entire genre of games, almost a board-based video games with minigames, which we had never seen before up to that point. There was Sonic Shuffle, Fusion Frenzy, across tons of others that I can't even remember. But the only one to really last, Tris, was Mario Party. It ended up having a certain quality to it that no other game series has been able to match. And that says something, even with it being a little bit rough to go back to the first, because that game is brutal.
Yeah.
That game just kicks into high gear. It's constantly punishing you. The 1 versus 3 minigames, if you lose in those, you lose money. You lose your coins and give them to your opponents. And I don't want to say I hate it, because it's kind of hilarious when you're screwing over your opponents, but it really sucks when you're the one getting screwed over. So I don't know if it's worth the trade-off, and even though I think the more modern Mario Parties have gone a little bit too soft, Mario Party 1 might go a little too hard in the other direction of being a little too hard.
I think Mario Party 1 is the definition of when people joke about Mario Party is the friendship-ruining game. They mean Mario Party 1, whether they realize it or not, because that is so brutal.
It is brutal. Yeah, I mean, not just emotionally, but physically too, with the control stick mini games, which are horrible, by the way, especially now that they're on Switch as well. With the original 64 controller, that's going to bore a hole into your hand just like it used to. So be careful with that. I recommend not doing that, not using your palm, even though I still do because I'm insane and I gotta win.
I think the fact that the stick spinning minigames are so prevalent too. It's not there's 1 or 2 we have in Superstars. There's quite a few, and they're all the lowest points of the game.
Yeah, there's a handful of them, and given the fact that this game has, I think, what might be the fewest amount of minigames in any Mario Party, given it was the first, they come up pretty frequently, and yeah, that freaking paddle battle or whatever it is where you're on the boat and you're all competing against each other 1 versus 3.
Oh, gosh.
That one sucks. Or tug of war, it's the same basic thing. You're just constantly rotating that thing and it really hurts. So yes, I'm glad they got rid of them until they brought them back for some stupid reason in the latest games. I cannot fathom why they did that. In any case though, it's all not negative here because it is still fun. It's just, particularly with the first one, there are some elements that I think it does really well. With the first 2, I should say. But the first one in particular had 8 boards, which is awesome. And the first 2 games have a special charm to them that I think got lost a little bit with the sequels. I was looking, look at the map behind me, Tris.
Yeah.
Horrorland. The map, I forgot how good it was in the original game. It has so many details with, from the shifted day to night. It has almost some light plot elements or story elements rather, where things change in a way that kind of evolves your understanding of this world.
Yeah.
I was looking at it super in depth recently. I'm oh, there's so many details here, where you can see a taxi that veers off the road in the daytime and it turns into a possessed taxi at night. That's totally missing from the newer version in Superstars. And there's just lots of little fun details like that that I like the new version, but like, there's a certain quality to this classic one that to these classic ones that we missed. Like another one of my favorites is in Mario Party 1, there are some hilarious moments where something will happen to the characters. Like I was on Luigi's engine room as in the first game, and I went to a Bowser spot, and he takes 20 of your coins in exchange to convert them into one. And like Mario will like look at the camera, he's like, "You seen this? Like, look what you just did to me!" And they like break the fourth wall. It's hilarious. And there's like little moments like that I think just give these original games like a special charm that I don't want to say it's necessarily better than the new ones, but like just unique to its own, and it's fun to revisit that.
Yeah, there's something a bit more cartoony about it. There's something a bit more charming about it in that nature.
Yeah, I mean, this is still like in an era, like, they're still experimenting with 3D. They hadn't, filtered Mario down to like the perfect mascot that he is these days, right? So they're like a little bit more lenient, I feel like in some cases. Like this was the era when they would just throw Mario's head onto a tank and call it a day, in a tank-based game.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not even just Mario, that's like all of the main cast here. Like, Donkey Kong's model is hilarious in this game, I just gotta be honest. And he looks so doofy in every single minigame he's in, with like the dead-eye stare that he has.
100%. Like, DK's model is kind of rough, as it was for most games of that era, with anything with DK. The graphics obviously aren't great. Some elements hold up better than others. There are times where I'm like, that was actually pretty impressive. Like, because a lot of the games have like varied appearances, and some just naturally look better than others. There's some pretty cool lighting effects at points, which I'm like, hey, I didn't know the 64 was really capable of that. Or I don't know. There are times when it impresses. Overall, it's not great, but I do like. Surprisingly enough, the pre-rendered elements like hold up probably the best, like with the boards being pre-rendered, or like some of the backdrops as well. And those are kind of fun to see, but that's long since been basically a lost art, to where now, it's completely, everything's uniform these days.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, despite both of these games being pretty similar, I think Mario Party 2 probably does it a little bit better because of the costume elements and the fun, charming aspect you were just talking about that actually gets kind of pushed further than any other Mario Party does there with, the costumes for the characters.
Oh, 100%. And Mario Party 2 really, Mario Party 2 is such a refinement of the first game. Like, it takes everything the first game did well, the basic foundation of, like, going around, collecting coins, cashing those in for stars, and just really ramping it up. Because they enhanced the minigames. They kept the good ones, they added even more of their own. They improved the boards, even though there are fewer boards, which I do like having 8 in the first one. Most of them don't hold up that great. Some of them are pretty lame. Luigi's engine room isn't all that fun. For instance, on the first game, and going to the second, I would say almost all of them play better overall than most of the ones on the first. And that's partially because they lean into something that the first game didn't, and that's that they gave you more agency in the second game. Now, there's still a ton of luck involved, as there is in almost any Mario Party, but they really made it feel like you have more control, like whether there being more options on the board, whether it's being more split paths, or having a hootenanny on the Westerland board where you have everyone, come to the same spot, or riding the train around. There is just so much more you can do. And adding on top of that is the item system, which is a game changer, where you can now buy items to store and use later. And I love that twist. Like, that's such a huge improvement from 1. It adds so much more strategy, letting you deploy, different techniques at different times on the board. And it completely changes the game, in my opinion. And that's the biggest issue with going back to Mario Party 1. There is so little agency. There's so much of it being left to the dice, almost the entirety of it, besides the occasional split path and maybe being able to use Boo. And that's about it. Whereas the second one really makes it feel like you have more control over your fate, even if, again, a lot of it does come down to luck still. And that is really why the first game is so much rougher to go back to these days, because it just feels like a lot of it's out of your hands, outside of your performance in the minigames. And that almost kind of like lopsides it too, because if you're good at the minigames, you have a better chance at just doing better overall than in 2, just because you can't use strategy to mitigate your minigame skill, or complement it, or whatever else. So yeah, that's where Mario Party 1 is a little harsh to go back to, in that there's less skill overall, or less strategy, I should say, less agency, and the fact that it's so much more punishing with you losing coins in like 1 versus 3s or 2 versus 2s, or they rotate the control stick minigames with the physical pain, and it's just a little rough these days.
It is also worth noting too how much Mario Party 1 embraces its own chaos, because of the items you buy in the shop are mostly like random occurring events. Item blocks, or dice blocks that only have 1 through 3. Dice blocks that steal coins from you.
Okay, right.
The warp block.
Yeah. So to clarify, the item shop, there aren't items in Mario Party 1. What you're talking about is the item shop that exists in the overworld that unlocks like random abilities that appear without any say at all.
Exactly.
So yeah, it could be a warp block, it could award you random coins. So it's just more randomness on top of what's already a very random game.
Exactly.
And yeah, so it is, as you were saying, it is really complete chaos. And it was, so what they essentially did was take that idea and incorporate it into a board game based or a board based item shop that lets you use those items at will. And yeah, that was such a much better idea. Like it gave more context to the coins. It created a dynamic of like, should I cash in these coins for this item or should I save it for the star? Like it creates so many more opportunities, so much more, such a deeper level of engagement. And it's just way more fun because it feels like if you lose in that one, it almost feels like more, I could have done better about that. I could have done something about that. Whereas the Mario Party 1 is like, well, it was out of my hands. You know, there's not much I could have done. And so it makes winning in Mario Party 2 feel more satisfying as a result as well. Even if, of course, there's still a lot of random-based stuff. Chance time is still there. You can still trade all your stars at the last minute, of course. There's no avoiding that. But I think Mario Party 2 definitely strikes a better balance with the chaos versus strategy.
Yeah, and I could definitely understand that. Yeah, 2 is definitely a better balance of everything they wanted to do for 1 that builds upon it in a way that's more digestible to casual players. Because at this point...
Digestible? Because there's dice in it?
Oh, that was good. But like, when you really look at it, Mario Party 1 is something that I think more so appeals to the like really like competitive friend groups, the people that like really want to win with their friends and screw each other over and just like have a crazy time. Whereas Mario Party 2 onwards, it really is more like, yeah, you can play this with your friends, you can have a more casual time, people that don't play video games can pick up Mario Party and play it and not necessarily suffer.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love screwing people over in video games, Tris. It's one of the favorite things to do. And that's actually why I prefer Mario Party 2, because I have the agency to do that. Like, I actually can make that choice. You know, I can use a dueling glove to duel someone for all their coins if I want, or buy a magic lamp and use it at the worst time to screw over someone, or the best time for me, the worst time for someone else, to screw them out of a star they're near. Like, that's why I love that, and that's why I much prefer it now to Mario Party 1. Even if I enjoyed Mario Party 1 back in the day, like, I know even then I would get frustrated by just being randomly screwed over, whereas now it's like, okay, you screwed me over, I'm targeting you now. And I think beyond that, just too, Tris, like, you know, Mario Party 2, there's just a lot of refinements across the board, including, you know, adding more types of mini games. Like they added the duel mini game, which is, you know, as I mentioned, you know, is more interesting. They added battle mini games, which adds a little bit more chaos into it, and that's something you can purposely try to aim for in the game as well if you want to, you know, kind of throw a wrench into the works for people or try and get more coins if you're low on them. The minigame selection, as I mentioned, is overall way better, including classics like a better version of Bombs Away, Torpedo Targets, Bumper Balloon Cars, Sneak and Snore, which is still great, Speed Hockey, Day at the Races, which I love. Yes, it's pure random, but I love it. Now, that's not to say they're all perfect. There's some terrible ones there, like Honeycomb Havoc, which came back for some freaking reason. Crane Game sucks as well, and there's a few more I could mention. But I also want to give a shout out to some good minigames from Mario Party 1 as well, which I don't think we've really seen come back, at least maybe we did, but not in the newest games. Like Bombsketball is a lot of fun, and I think that's a good template they could build on. Of course, Shy Guy Says, the classic, started there, came back in 2 and more recent ones. The original Bobsled Run is great. Deep Sea Divers is a fun one as well, that we haven't seen come back in the more recent ones. But it too has some crappy minigames, like all the rotate the control stick minigames. Crazy Cutters is pointless with that one, because as long as you score above a certain threshold, you always win, so it's basically impossible not to win. And of course, this is the birthing place of Piranha's Pursuit, which came back in Mario Party Superstars for some reason, and it's broken because it's impossible to lose at it if you're the skateboarding person. So
unless you like really mess up, yeah.
Unless it's your first try ever at the game, there's no way you're losing it. Yeah.
Man, there's so much like fun with both versions of the minigames that, like, looking back at, because so many minigames from 1 came back in some form in 2, whether it's exactly the same minigame or it's like kind of reskinned, like Shy Guy Says, for example, where it's the same minigame, but instead of out at sea, you're now like flying up in the sky. And it's kind of interesting to look at how they changed some of the minigames too between those.
It is, yeah. I mean, you know, they added, I think, more varied maps for bumper balls, for instance. The slot car, I think slot car came back, right? And I think with new maps as well. Yeah, there's just like little refinements to a lot of the games that do make them more fun, more replayable, and that's kind of the general vibe of the game overall. Like, even though there are fewer maps, they all feel better overall. Like, I would almost rather play almost any map from Mario Party 2 than some of the ones, or most of the ones from Mario Party 1. Though that isn't to say Mario Party 1 isn't without its classics. I've always been a fan of DK Jungle, especially with its Womp moving mechanic, which actually came back in Horror Land in Mario Party 2, which I think might overall be, as it's behind me, the overall best map of Mario Party history. It is such a great map. The day and night mechanic is brilliant, and it started an entire Mario Party was based on that idea. I think this map still does the best, in my opinion. But then there's also Mario's Rainbow Castle, which is fun with the Toad and Bowser switching mechanic, where you have to be careful of getting to so you land on the one you want and not the one you don't want. Although again, in Mario Party 1, you don't have a whole lot of say in that scenario, and it's one that would actually play better these days with the item shops. But then you have, interestingly, I think Peach's birthday cake may possibly be better in the original version than it is in the new one, because I actually kind of like I think the items almost throw off the pace of the board in the newer ones, and I kind of like that this one is so focused on a linear path. It's just a pure, really kind of chaotic, race to get around the board, and also to avoid going to the Goomba that now takes you around the loop before the star, which is hilarious. Like, it totally changes the dynamic of the board, whereas in the new one, the potential loop comes out after the star, acting as a shortcut back to it. In the original game, it acts as a punishment, and makes it so it takes longer to get to the star. I was just playing it recently, my friend ended up in the loop twice in a row, and he was getting angry, and I enjoyed that as someone who enjoys punishing my friends. But yeah, even though there are a handful of boards I enjoy in the original, most of them are a little hard to go back to, given it's the overall gameplay dynamics of Mario Party 1 versus the later series, with the items and more choices you have. Although I do want to say real quick about Mario Party 2, as much as I like the item system here, it is a little weird to go back to having a single item at a time as opposed to the 3 introduced in Mario Party 3, and of course, in the most recent game as well, Mario Party Superstars, because it makes keys, for instance, way less useful, because there are less opportunities to use keys, and you generally don't want to hold onto an item they have a rare chance of using, because there are better items you can have in the meantime. Exactly. And so it kind of throws off the balance that I think Mario Party Superstars actually did improve in some ways, giving you a wider, just letting you use a wider variety of items because you can hold 3 of them at a time.
Yeah, the item balance, I really like that they introduced items into, and that you could definitely see the start of the system they wanted to go for there, but it really wasn't refined even there. It still felt a bit unbalanced against using some items, and it wasn't really until later games that it started getting better about it. Yeah,
I agree. So I enjoy the item system in 2, but you can definitely see where it improved in 3, and I do kind of miss that looking back, like the fact that you do have a little bit less agency overall than you do in 3 and some of the other Mario parties, just because only having a single item at a time can really kind of lock you into a specific gameplay style or strategy, which feels a little bit more versatile in the more recent games, and I like that. With that said, though, 2 is still overall better than 1, in my opinion, I think. And that's why it's kind of weird they're releasing both at the same time, because I feel like, man, it's kind of overshadowing 1, because why play 1 if you can play 2? And it kind of sucks, but I think 1 still has, it still has some moments. I think it's still worth revisiting at the least, just to see what it was. Okay. But then again, if you have 2 as an option, that's one I think most people are going to default to, because it is just better. It took the idea of 1 and did everything better.
I think that summarizes it pretty well, yeah. And I think that was probably part of the intent when they made 2. You could see a lot of elements there. They chose to take what they did in 1, but improve it.
Yeah, and shout out to 2 for the costumes, as you said, which never came back. I love the costumes, that's still charming. And also the animated boards. It's such a simple thing. The boards only have 2 frames of animation, but they're cute and endearing, and I like it. So, and that's actually a perfect place for me to wrap it up here, Tris. I like Mario Party 2. Mario Party 1 is mixed for me. I think had this been 20 years ago, each one of them would have been bumped up. But given the fact that we now have Superstars and Mario Party 3 as well, and other Mario Parties that have arguably done some elements better, I think, there are elements of these games that are a little dated, and both in the controls of some minigames, like with Mario Party 1, the control stick minigames, and also the limited item system of both games. But I think they are still fun. Even though I'm giving Mario Party 1 a mixed, it's still enjoyable at points. I still have fun, even if it can be extremely frustrating at times as well. But Mario Party 2 overall, it's aged better. it's still fun, still quite a bit of fun, and I definitely like it overall.
All right, that's solid. And you even said before, you still recommend people check them out at least. I mean, you're gonna have access to
check
both
them out.
right away.
Yeah, a mixed rating is not a bad rating. It's still enjoyable. It just means that there are elements that haven't necessarily aged well and done better by other games. And it's like, why would you necessarily play one when you have to? But there are still unique elements to it that are probably worth just checking out before you fully move on to 2.
Right. Well, I think that'll wrap up this full little review discussion sort of thing that we had going on here with the unfortunate not actual DLC for Mario Party Superstars, but Mario Party 1 and 2, which by the time this video goes up should be available or soon to be available on Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack. So thank you all for watching, and stay tuned to GameXplain for plenty more on these, because we're going to be covering them. All sorts of content on Mario Party, because we love that here. But, of course, other things gaming as well. Until next time, though, farewell everyone.